Welcome back, mere mortals, to another edition of the Musings. We look back at the week that was, the times that we've had, the learnings, the thoughts, the things we want to share, bounce off each other, maybe off the mere mortalites as well. I've got my co-host Karen down off to the side.
Hey.
And we are in a little bit of a different location today. We are closer to home, because we've got a few restrictions going around right now in the beautiful country of Australia. So we're just making sure we're staying clear of the police, but probably not as clear from the birds that seem to be on the roof of this gazebo.
Did you know that in the olden days, they used to call the police the traps? Like, the traps are after me. Yeah, I got this from the Ned Kelly book I was reading.
Whoa,
yeah,
no.
The traps.
The traps.
Yeah.
Dang.
TRAPS. I don't know. Just a random little thing for you there.
There you go. I never knew that. I've got a couple of things I'm going to be talking about being the best, but being the best you, not the best of the best.
Okay.
And a little comment that came my way, and it changed maybe some of the perspectives that I want to bounce off you. Okay,
so I talked about this a week ago, but we never actually got into it, which was free speech. So I wanted to talk about free speech and a learning that I've had from my more language journey. So something connected with that, yeah.
Okay. I might start with mine when it's a little bit thick.
Yeah.
So
go into yours.
There's a couple of things here. So I said being the best you, not the best of the best. And there was a couple of little things that I've been hearing through this week that sort of like integrated together. Okay. So one of them was, it was on a Tony Robbins podcast, but also got sent somewhere else that I can't really recall right now. And it was it was in a TikTok video. And it was this particular thing where it said, you are, the wife or the husband to your equivalent partner. You are, the son to your parents. You are the friend to your friends. But who are you to yourself? Right, because in this particular TikTok, it was more of a sort of sentimental video around how he had this particular question where he was being all these great things for everybody else, and then the psychiatrist was kind of talking to him saying, being like, well, who are you to yourself? That's one part of it, and the other part of it was another little quote that I heard, which was around being the best you, not the best of the best, and so it kind of made me think a little bit of we've talked about the growth for growth's sake, and whether you should do that or not. But have you ever actually stopped and thought about what, if you are all those things to other people, what sort of person are you to yourself? And so it kind of got me, a little bit of thought I had was, okay, I can see how I am all these things to other people. And the first thing that comes to mind is, what am I when I'm on my own? So when I'm training. And I go, okay, well, sometimes I can be a very tough person on myself, or you can be not to the level of perfectionism, but I'd say someone that'd be like, I'd expect more from you, from that particular person. I went, do I do that to other people? And my short answer was like, yes, I do that. And I kind of stumbled of how would I describe it of what I am to myself. And I went, I'm probably like a semi-good friend to myself. That's how I landed it. But I wouldn't say that I'm like my best supporter. So I wouldn't say, do I have a relationship to myself that'd be like a familial one? No, it's definitely just like a good friend that is forever, or maybe at the moment, forever thinking like, oh no, could be better, could be doing better choices. So I don't know, have you ever stopped to think about like, okay, what sort of individual are you to yourself in your own thoughts?
Slightly. I mean, I think the thing that might be different for me is that I've never thought about myself in relation to others. Like I've never thought of myself as, the son to my mum and dad. Like honestly, it wasn't until recently that I really cared about, the obligations and duties that are sort of part of that, which is
what that brings,
of when they're starting to get sick, look after them and things like that. In terms of friends, like I'd never thought like, how could I be a better friend and things like that. So I've always been very inward looking and focused like that. So in one respect, like I've been doing this my whole life, and in a way, in that other bit where you were talking about, I think my problem was maybe I would not look at, maybe like what am I to others? I did actually, I'm taking it all back. Because I did spend a lot of time of being like, how do other people see me? That sort of thing. Maybe it's slightly different.
Maybe it's like that would be more like, what are you to society, or how do you see yourself to society, rather than those specific like friends.
Actually,
family.
That's not more what am I to others. The focus would be like, what do others see on me?
Sure.
So that's more like putting myself into their mindset, looking at me, rather than me looking at like my relation to them. So maybe that's slightly different.
Yeah, I think what it made me more think about was just the okay, if I had to if it was me talking to myself, or like similar question, people would be like, oh, what would you say to yourself, a 10-year younger version of yourself? I think when you think of that question, it seems easy to explain some things like, oh, study hard, maybe get to know people, like build relationships, all these maybe first thoughts that come to your mind are like, oh, that's the easy stuff. But if just imagine, let's say that you had yourself in front of you, like you had yourself, like maybe from 5 seconds ago or something like that, and you basically have the same sort of thoughts and ideas that you have like right now with the person you're talking to, then it just makes me think, okay, well, what would I actually try to influence this person, or what would I say to this person if I had to say something? And that's where I go, okay, I feel like rather than being super hard, I should be more looking at focusing on just being the best you, as opposed to being the best of the best. So I reckon there's a lot of my mentality which strays towards best of the best, as opposed to best of you. So a couple of, I think it was, I can't remember which musings one, but we were talking about my plan for in the future, in the next year, doing the stability, strength, aerobic capacity, and anaerobic endurance, or vice versa, right? And I remember, I re-listened to that portion, and even re-listening to it, even though in the time I was like, oh, I totally know what I was talking about, or I totally remember what I was saying, I kind of went, oh, but I could push it, and I could be better. Like maybe I could stack it and be like, oh, I want to be top 100 in Australia in this particular thing, or whatever, whatever comparison. And it kind of stopped me and went, well, is that really what I want to be doing? Or is it just to be the best me and whatever that equates to? So I think there's always a battle to be had, sometimes in what you might say, and sometimes what you would actually say to yourself if it was like another person, because there's probably a subliminal side of things where I might be saying this, but subliminally or unconsciously I'm saying like, oh no, but you gotta actually be the best, not just the best. You gotta be the best. So, and I don't know exactly where that sort of comes from. I'm sure there's some built in there from family or other places, but it's always interesting to just actually know what's the actual stuff that's not said that your body's telling you, or that you're actually telling yourself in there somewhere.
Would you like yourself if you met yourself and it was just like, you to a T, except for whatever reason your brain didn't recognize as like, oh, that's literally me? Would you like that person?
I think that there'd be some occasions where I wouldn't like myself, and that would have to be by my own very nature when it's things that are really competitive. Because I think as me, I might be like, oh, this person's being annoying, too competitive.
Bit of jackass.
Bit of jackass. In maybe more normal situations, totally cool. But there'd be places where I would go, oh, no, I wouldn't want it. And you go, oh, okay, why is it? And is it actually wrong? Because sometimes it's like, okay, well, it's not like you have sometimes friends who are exactly the same person as you, nor partners who are exactly the same, or nor your parents, although they can be closer. So it's not like you actively going to have that in like your normal day-to-day life, but it's a good thing to pose and go, is it? Do you think you would be? You'd get along with yourself?
Definitely, like 10 years ago, the answer to that would have been hell no. There was way too many things that I didn't like about myself, and so if I saw them in other people, I was probably a bit more judgmental back then as well. Nowadays, I think I would, like you were saying, in most situations, maybe like a couple of like real outlier ones, not so much. But I'd struggle right at the start. I think that initial meeting period of the just the first hour or first day or whatever. I'm not, because I'm not super outgoing, super friendly all the time. Even at the park, like there was even times today when I was thinking like, oh, I should have been more friendly to those other like random people who are here. Like I could have done that. So yeah, I would have said like that initial period would probably be a struggle. But after that, I think
might get a bit better.
Yeah, now, and especially nowadays, I'm a lot more like chilled out and less judgmental. I'd say more accepting. That being said, I would still probably look at that person and chuck some things on them and not be able to see that in myself right now. So like,
which is interesting, right? Like, why would you be able to see them on that person but not on yourself?
I don't know, man. I think it's just very hard to introspect like that.
Which is what I mean. This always goes back to me of the just having that almost your own panel, your own board, whether it's friends, family, whoever you want to build, to be openly to be telling you like, hey, this is what you're doing wrong. But obviously you would have to build them to a level that's like people that you trust, like a sounding board that you actually trust. And so when they're saying something, it's not to hurt you, it's not to bring you down, it's to be like, oh, hey, this is the reality that you're probably missing either subconsciously or because you just don't want to see it, whatever it may be.
Yeah, I think the other thing is I need to do a bit more research into this, but definitely that aspect of having not multiple personalities in the sense of like, oh, you know, it's like a crazy guy over here, it's the Joker, and then it's your, you know, Jekyll and Hyde, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But having, you know, different parts of your personality that emerge in different locations. So for me, there's, you know, Spanish Michael, and he's a different person than Kyron.
Yep.
And so that's like a real obvious one. That's so in my face that it's impossible to ignore. But what about me versus when I'm with my family versus me with you, for example, or me outside in a bar versus outside in the calisthenics park?
Sure.
I think that there's a different person there, and it's you know,
faint but different.
Yeah,
still.
yeah. And you know, you speak to some people and they're like, oh no, I'm like the same no matter what. Like I'm the same with my parents as I am with whatever. And I feel that's a bit of a bullshit answer because I don't think
that
that's
reminds me
really...
of Frankie.
Yeah.
And it's not a terrible thing. Like I know Frankie was saying, like, yes, I'm like this to absolutely everybody, which is fine. Just be ready that people are going to hate you. Like there's some people who are going to be like, well, that's pretty stupid. Like I wouldn't really talk to my family how I would talk to friends.
Yeah, no
Why?
way. No
because
way.
there's different relationships being built. There's different, you know, idiosyncrasies. There's different ideologies in there as well.
Yeah.
So there's just stuff that I wouldn't do. Now, I think that what people get caught up in is they go, well, then you're not being your true self.
Yeah,
and I go,
exactly.
no, suck
True
it up.
self.
That's not it's not that you're not being your true self. That is like you are receptive to the world around you and you're being yourself where it matters. Like
Yeah.
just because
I'd
it reminds me of in the UAE or in Dubai. You know, you're not supposed to hold hands. So because you're yourself and you just like holding your partner's hand, so you're going to do it anyways. Like no matter what, even you get thrown in jail.
Yeah.
No, like there's other boundaries, there's other social cues, whatever. They get built up. They go, okay, maybe you shouldn't do that, even that is yourself.
I wonder what people with bipolar or schizophrenia think of this, you know, true self thing, be your authentic self. Like, what do they think of that? Because they have the ability to be like, yes, there's definitely me in these two different situations. So,
do you know of the TV show Stateless on
Stateless?
Netflix?
No.
And of the German who got it incorrectly put into an asylum in Brisbane?
No.
All right, we're not going to talk about it here, but I'll talk about. I'll tell you about it either later or in another podcast.
Okay, sounds good.
But there's another part to this particular story. So why am I talking about this? Obviously, it came up in my mind. I went, ooh, okay, this is interesting. This is cool. But I went, when is this ever really going to apply to real life, right? Or
a good question.
It does. It does apply a lot of times. It's, you know, I would say when you're being reflective, maybe you're reflecting on not just monthly goals, but yearly goals. I'm thinking, okay, I can see this when I need to be able to be like a third person viewing of what I'm doing to understand this correctly. However, something came to me just recently, and I'm going to actually pull this up to make sure I get this correct in the exact procedure. I'm not going to call out who the person was, but Reddit. You know, Reddit. I'm posting on ASX Bets. I'm posting in a couple of other places.
That's just pure entertainment from the last episode. People.
And someone posted this thing. They were talking about something about stonks, right? And I said something in relation to tax, right? How much tax I had to pay, and this is what I was going to do because people were talking about that. Now, this person actually sent me a message. Now, there's lots of messages here, right?
Okay.
So he basically just sent a message like, hey, oh, damn, you know, how are you paying so much taxes? And, you know, that's a pretty interesting strategy about what you're doing. Can you tell me about it? Now, I was just purely going to reply with, this is my idea. Nothing else, nothing major to it, right? But now it shifted, and it shifted in the sense that the individual told me, oh, like, you know, by the way, he asked me, how did you get that position? Then straight away he said, I'm in high school. So I just want to know how successful people did it. And I went, whoa. Okay, so first of all, it just humbled me. I was like, oh, damn, this is like a random Reddit person.
Yeah.
And he might actually be listening to this because I told him to check it out. But he then proceeded to ask me a couple of questions. And I proceeded to like give him some lengthy responses. And it was just, you know, asking, you know, how did you get your position? What was really most important? And I actually just thought about some things. I went, actually, you know, what was most important for me was network and learning how to, you know, build relationships. And he was asking questions around uni and what did you get that from uni? I went, actually, I learned from uni was like problem solving, analytics. But when I learned networking and relationships, that was through like pure force of just talking to people, getting myself out there, reading this sort of stuff. This is what helped, this is what didn't. Basically just telling him this sort of information. And I kind of went with the side of, I actually had to think quite hard when I had to explain to him those things. And it made me reflect back on, okay, how did I go about doing, you know, X, Y, and Z and what led me there? So I think there's actually some real life examples in the world where someone will ask you that, maybe who either like a high school person or somebody else, but I think it's something worth noting in your mind of like, do you look enough at what you're actually saying, what you're consciously saying and subconsciously thinking, and seeing if they actually match in the world.
Yeah, I jump between thinking the things I say matter, and then I just like they don't matter at all. I jump between those two all the time.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Well, sometimes it's even the clear things where you could say to yourself, I am going to go to the gym tomorrow. You watch a motivational video the day before, all these sort of things. And in the end, maybe if you had just laid out your shoes by your bed, that would have been more of a push than anything you said to yourself. Like your subconscious would be like, nah, I'm not going to do it. But you step on your shoes, something like, okay, I'll go. Right. And that's what ends up driving you. But you, by false pretense, think like, oh, it's because I talked myself into it. And the next time it happens and you don't lay out the shoes, you don't go. And then it's like, oh, shit. Well, I'm terrible. Maybe I don't know how to talk. And it's like, oh, no, actually, it was just subconscious that you place that thing there, so it forced you to go. And I think there's a lot of those hidden things within oneself that you just don't know, obviously, because you just can't know or you can't see until you have other people either seeing it for you, or maybe you got to implement those sort of little stop checks to go, is it actually what I'm thinking or what I'm actually doing?
Yeah, I mean, it's so hard, man. Looking inside yourself and figuring out what's going on.
It's not easy. It's not easy.
Here's a good example. So if you tune into many of the last ones I was talking about, I'm probably going to join the gym soon.
Yes.
And I was saying this about, that's not going to happen. Like,
No.
I'm not going to join the gym. And funnily enough, like, looking at it now, I'm like, you know what? That's probably a good thing, because my reasons for joining it, there was good reasons and there was bad reasons. The good reasons was, it'll let me be a little bit more social, because I'll probably start going to yoga classes. I'll probably, and this is the probably bit, like I'm not exactly sure if I would have, but if I'm paying for something, I usually try and use it.
Use it, yep.
So there's that, but then there's the fact that I was wanting to go to the gym because I hate the cold and I didn't want to exercise out in the cold. And, maybe that is something I need to get better at doing, just accepting, hey, go out, do it. You'll warm up in it. Like,
Got to be savage sometimes.
Yeah, got to be savage sometimes. So, was that avoidance of that the correct thing? I don't know. So, all of those things they're tricky, man.
Yeah,
they're tricky.
I'll leave it to the mere mortalites. It's deep topics. Think about it. Don't think about it too hard, because I think you can definitely
that's the other thing. Yeah,
don't understand. I say all this in the sense that it is deep, but also it's one of those where maybe think about what you first think, and then go, what's the second and third things that you think about, and then probably leave it at that, because it's sometimes there's probably a part of it that there's not much you can do about it as well. Like we're talking about ourselves, right? We're about 29 years of built life, right? Or life experience, and hell, probably 70% of that is not from our own doing. It's from our environment, it's culture, it's your ideology.
I'm not just unthinking. Like, you're just doing things unthinkingly. Like, there's no thought behind why am I doing this.
Well, it's even to think of you're born in a particular place in a particular area of Australia,
and all those
so your
things,
ideology is built to this, and as much as you've wanted to learn something different, and by reading other stuff, you just simply do not understand what could have been from that perspective. It's like I was saying, important, but don't get too caught up as well.
Yeah, I was just thinking, if you'd asked me this maybe a year ago or 6 months ago, it probably would have been a better question for me then, because I was more in the introspection phase. But now I'm in the more like, get rid of less things,
chill
like
out,
do more things unthinkingly, just sort of zen out a bit more. So let's come back to it in 6 months' time.
Back in the introspection phase.
Yeah. Free speech. Free speech. How much does this matter to you? Get right into it. Is this a theme that you think of regularly or have strong thoughts about in general?
I think in the broad sense of free speech, as in, just let's be simple, like you can post anything you want to Twitter, anything you want to Facebook, anything you want to Instagram.
Well, you can't. Even them, you can't.
Sure.
You can't put pornography on.
But let's say they say one side of free speech, you should be able to say anything. Absolutely anything.
That's the very extreme limit, yes.
Okay. Do I care? Generally, top of my... No, not really. I don't care. Post whatever you want, And if someone's takes it the wrong way and they want to fight about it, I understand that. If it's really offensive, I understand that. But you're always going to be offensive to someone at very, very broad time. So it's not like I particularly care too much.
Do you care in the sense of if it's being infringed upon, for example?
On myself or on other people?
Just in general.
I think on myself, there's probably a care factor there. So, probably I'll say it to the podcast. So then, if we, for some reason, we say we publish a podcast and on YouTube or another platform, and then we get like a cease letter, or we get a strike because we're talking about, I don't know, like a joke we said about gender or something like that, and they go, no, you cannot, then I'd have a problem with it. I'd go, okay, you're going to have to explain to me why that breached X, Y, Z. I would have a problem with that in the free speech sense. So I would extrapolate that if someone else said, like, oh, I tried to say this, Brett Weinstein and Joe Rogan or Brett Weinstein and whoever else, Lex Friedman was talking about, that sort of stuff. That irks me. I think there should be free speech. And I think Brett discussed about this where, is it bad to have, whatever information being propelled forward? And the whole thing being that, okay, you might have 95% that are bad, but the 5% that's good that you're blocking, that's some real bad stuff because you're blocking away stuff that could be really good for humanity. I have a problem with blocking some of that free speech.
Yeah, okay, yep.
I think that the pure reasoning, the only sense that I could have of one is the locking or the when shouldn't free speech be available? Maybe if it's pure malicious, like if it's pure malicious intent, there's no items that's supposed to be helping anything of humanity or no people. Like if someone's putting like you're a piece of shit and saying all these terrible lies about the individual that are not based in fact, and somehow algorithms can pick that up, I'd say yes, don't need that, get rid of that. That's the only time I'd say like, okay, no one should be able to post that sort of stuff.
Yeah. Okay.
Beyond that, I'd say, look, even if it's untrue, maybe it can help triangulate to the truth. So then I'd have a problem for that not being presented. Gotcha.
What about you? So this was something, I think it was Voltaire, but it could be Evelyn Beatrice Hall. Because have you heard of that thing before? I disapprove of what you say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it. So there's, in the Friends of Voltaire, Hall wrote that phrase. So I thought it was something to do with Voltaire, but didn't know. Is that something for you? Like if you saw... is that something like you'll defend another person's right to say awful, malicious things, even if they're about you? Are you on that sort of extreme? Because when I talked to my dad about this recently, it's a nice sentiment. I think it's good in a sense, but for me, applying it to me, like I just don't think I have that care in me. Like if YouTube started blocking us for certain things, I would probably just go elsewhere. Like I would, or I would choose to play the game because you have to play the game sometimes.
Sure,
Jocko talks about this all the time. Yes, you can be a loose cannon, saying whatever the hell you want, straight shooter. But if you do that all the time, you're not gonna, rise up the ranks. You're not gonna put yourself into a position in the future where you can enact changes. So it's that balance point where it's like, and this is where power corrupts absolutely, because if you start making these trade-offs and you keep trading off until the top, you then become, the ultimate politician and can't do shit because you've just traded away. Everything. Like you have no values anymore because you've cut down on all of them to appease more people. So I get it. For me, like I'll just blow my bit here. I don't care about it enough that I'm going to die for someone else to say for it. But in general, like yes, I think it's a very good thing. In general, trying to clamp down on it, it's a very stupid thing because just pragmatically it just drives it on the ground, then people do whatever they want and they become more radical and then the whole system goes over and yada yada yada. So for me it's definitely more on the side of more of it's better. And I tend to say more of if more along the lines of like I would rather someone be able to say the most heinous, brutal shit, just so that I know that's what their type of person is like, and then I can be like, I'm good. Like I'm gonna go over here. I'm gonna go over here. YouTube clamps down or Google clamps down on whatever. Now this is getting to the point where I understand like, okay, if Google doesn't let your like website be searched at all, like it's unable to be found on Google. Okay, that's a bit of a problem. Like that's because that will impact you. In many ways, hugely, and it's a hard one. But just in general, I'm more along the lines of like, yep, more is better. But am I going to go to the extremes of
the ends of the earth to change it? Maybe not.
Not so
I
much.
think also along many of these things, when it comes to let's say freedom of speech, I think you only care as much as it starts impacting you as well. Like, do you really care about freedom of speech? People who are like locked up. Do you care about freedom of speech in like Afghanistan or Iraq? you probably haven't given it 2 shits of a thought. Like,
Yeah, exactly.
We've got a lot of Indian listeners. You know?
Mm-hmm.
Has everyone been thinking about freedom of speech of Indians and the fact that TikTok banned their ability to post on TikTok for a long time, and then they had to go through all the stuff? Man, no one would have thought about it. No one cared. No one was putting up, like, saying, like, oh, they should, blah, blah, blah. Look, certainly there were some humans on Earth that did care. But why would you and me really be thinking about it? But if it was close to home, let's just say all of a sudden TikTok, YouTube, Google, all that banned you, like specifically you being like, oh, no, we think that you're a little bit too much of a hermit. No, you're not going to post anywhere. Then you'd be like, hey, there's a problem here. Like, you're locking my freedom of speech. So the closer it hits home, I think the more you will care. But
honestly, I think that's probably a good thing for most people.
Yeah, but I mean, but if they're
probably
doing
solve
that,
a lot of problems.
but, you know what I mean? But if they're doing that, there's a reason. And maybe I think about it just from the company's perspective. I don't think a lot of companies are out there, like a Facebook or a Google or whatever. I don't think people are out there going like, oh, yeah, we want to stop people talking. No, they're trying to get the algorithms to be as smart as possible to try and block out, I say, pornography on Instagram and Facebook and whatnot, killings in those sort of instances. Do they 100% get it? No. But the funny thing is, like, when the one thing gets through out of probably 20,000 that were trying to get posted, then it's like, shame on you, Facebook. Shame on you. You're terrible. It's like, man, it's like 0.001% of the content that's like bad that they're missing, and then people like lose a shit. I go, look, I think they're giving a lot of freedom of right, and they're trying to stop things. You're always going to find someone who's going to be happy with that. Like, you're going to find people who will fight to the death that the freedom of speech is being impacted for sure. Like, I can.
Oh, definitely. And I've seen it as well. Like, you know, Roosh, who I used to follow, he was way into the pickup stuff, and there was definitely some questionable things in some of his books where you're like, okay, this isn't rape, but it's not super kosher either.
Yeah.
Like, you know, the girls are like super drunk. And you know, just a little bit of dodgy stuff in there.
Yep.
He wrote a book actually called "Free Speech Isn't Free" when he tried to go into Canada to give some talks, and then everyone in Canada was like, again, I think even Trudeau mentioned it, or like one of the high-ranking, like, you know, officials in the government was like, this guy won't be allowed to speak in our country and whatnot. And he still did like his little like groups. He managed to make them work, like covert operations, sort of like just to speak in front of a crowd sort of thing.
Yeah.
And it was interesting watching that and then being like, oh, okay, there's actually an area where I see it is really impacting someone who, I care about in a sense. Like I gained a lot of wisdom and useful things from him over the years. Don't agree with everything, but yeah. So that was one where I was watching and I'm like, should I care about this? Like, it's really hard for me to know whether I should care about this or not.
I think the biggest root of that, of the freedom of speech, is why do you want freedom? That's my question. Like, as a mere mortal,
well, once getting back into the deep question.
The deep question: why do you want freedom? Like, as a human, why is it that you want the freedom, or why should you have, why the audacity of a human to say that you should be free to say whatever you want to say? Not to say that you should or shouldn't. I'm not saying anything in between there, but I'm saying, like, what as a human makes you want to be free to say whatever you want? Is it your own ego getting in the way, right? Is it your own like self way of being like, no, I'm a human just like you're a human, so I should be able to say whatever I have to say, whether that's I detest X race or I really like you, but people that don't wanting to be hearing all this sort of stuff. So I think the people who would come up with those sort of conversations, I know you're bringing this up from like you just had it as a topic, right? But I think the people who truly have those deep conversations about freedom of speech, I would be more interested to hear like why. Like, why is it that you want the particular freedom? Like, what is the difference that you're seeing in societies or in humans to want to have this conversation of freedom of speech? Like, what there is a freedom that's being denied of you? Because I think it's the simple question saying, like, well, not saying what I want to say. It's like, well, why is it that you should have that freedom? Like, is it like an absolute, commandment that you should be able to say whatever you want, or is it not? So
yeah, freedom's hard. I think even that in that
we
podcast,
had this conversation about freedom a long time ago, and it was just it's a hard topic to put up.
Yeah, I even remember in the definition stage of it being like, fuck, man, I'm not exactly clear on what we're talking about here. So
the even clearer example is they put up Jordan Peterson up on the stand of the podium of talking, and they'll always every video you'll just have someone come up and be like, well, what about like the females, the 98% who are trying to be, X, Y, Z, and they're not, and they're not getting paid enough money, and then Jordan will just like lay out reality, facts, all this sort of stuff. And they're sometimes trying to put it on like, oh, well, no, you shouldn't be saying that. You know, no, you can't be saying this. Like, and it's just facts. Now, whose freedom of speech is being impacted here? The fact of the one side that's trying to like play out their part, or the other one that's trying to defend like their point. Now, maybe someone looking at it from a third party perspective will go, freedom of speech maybe should be that both get their choice. But then I reckon each one of the parties will go, well, no, you're harming by saying all this stuff, and then having a completely different view of the matter. So in those aspects, like I'd be interested to hear like, okay, well, what does freedom mean to you in this context? Because you're obviously not thinking about it as like humans in general and freedom of speech. You're thinking freedom of speech on the things that you care about right now that you want someone to hear about. And if that's the case, is it productive to society, or is it just to stroke your ego to be like, oh well, you got heard, so like, well done.
Yeah. There's lots of this gets like real close to the topic of truth as well. Like, some people have like the utmost truth is the best thing. Sam Harris is a pretty good one in this. Like, he'll refuse to lie. Whereas for me, I'm definitely most of the way with him, and then there's like 5% where it's like, no, I think I have to like lie here, be very conscious of it, and I think it's the better thing to do. He's gone on ways into deep to the philosophy on that. I actually haven't gone too deep into philosophy. I sometimes think I'm into philosophy, but I'm really not, man. Like I haven't read any of like Freud, or not so much Freud. But like Heidegger or
Young or anything.
Parsons and all those sorts of people. Like, I was thinking of making that a goal for next year to actually read some, but
maybe reading it. Yeah, maybe reading it.
It's some of those are man, they can suck the fun out of it as well. Like I like this sort of philosophy where it's like, what ifs, would you rathers, how would this happen? Would you like yourself, that sort of thing. But I think when you get into like the deepest stuff,
I think true philosophy without a basis in reality is as useless as
right on, man.
giving an exclamation mark. Like, it's just stupid. Like, philosophizing about, well, what if the tree was pink?
I would put it on the same level as going so deep into the metabolism, and so deep into like, oh yeah, I've got to eat every
17.2 seconds,
X amount of hours, this exact amount of grams. And I'm just thinking, like, if you spent all of that time that you had used in thinking about this stuff and just altered your routine slightly better, perhaps made some more money, so then you can chuck that money to get rid of some shit thing that you have to do at the moment. Like, it'd be way better. So I'm right on with that one.
That funny meme where it's like it's a chef and he's cooking like this little meal, and it's just, I don't know what it was something random, and then she goes, this lady on the side taste it and be like, if this had cheese and a bit of meatballs, this would taste like this.
No, so I know exactly what you so it's on it's one of the English channel shows, and it's hard to tell if it was staged or not as well, because these ones,
maybe it's a little bit, but I mean the reaction seems pretty brutal.
It's essentially like Italian dude's cooking a macaroni, and she's like, you know what, if you or is cooking like an authentic Italian dish, and then she was like, oh yeah, no, but if you actually added some ham into this, it would be like a nice carbonara or something like that. And then he's just looks at her like pure blank face and is like, that's like saying, if your grandmother had wheels, she'd be a bike. Yeah. I mean, what are we talking about? Yeah.
It's exactly that. I think philosophizing without a basis in reality, you might as well forget. You might as well be talking about if your grandmother was a bike.
Yeah.
That's my mere mortal quote. That's my mere mortal quote today. Like, if you're talking about your grandmother having wheels and being a bike, then you've too deeply gone into philosophy.
Yeah, for sure. I wanted to really get onto this one before we finished up. Did you have any more?
No.
Okay, so you were talking a little bit recently about a little bit, and you started hearing me say it, and then you started hearing everyone else say it.
Yes.
And now I've found that I'm like hearing everybody else say it.
Yes.
And I used to think, and I actually had this exact same thing with Spanish. When I was learning Spanish, I was like, why the hell are you adding ito or ita onto everything? The diminutive, making it like, oh, it's small, chiquito.
Yeah.
Like
small male or small female equivalent.
Yeah. Or you could say pequeño, which is small, and then you could say
pequeñito,
pequeñito, which is even smaller. Like, why is this necessary? And you do it with everything.
Yeah.
Like the boy, el niño, niñita, like all of these things. So, okay. I just realized, like, holy shit, English has the exact same thing. You just say a little bit, and it's everywhere, man. I'm starting to hear it everywhere. It's so much. You're bang on with that point. But this was just one of the fun things with languages that I was realizing recently. Here's one for you, and I don't know if you've ever noticed this because it's in, your native language, I guess, in a sense. Do you know how to say to handcuff in Spanish?
Maniacat?
No. Esposar.
Esposar.
And do you also know what wife and husband means?
Yeah. Esposa.
Esposo. Yeah. So literally in Spanish, it means like the handcuff
is the wife
or husband.
Dang.
When I came across it, I'd actually heard esposar a long time in the past, and I obviously knew wife and husband from a long time ago. So only just recently, I was like, oh, what's the handcuff? How do you say that? Like, look it up. And then I just looked at esposar. I'm like, I get it.
Dang.
Like, that's hilarious in that it's, morbidly funny in a way. It's like your handcuff.
There's a lot of funny stuff in Spanish that I can't retell the same joke in English because it is in the Spanish sense that. It could be like, esposo.
And like, look, there'd be so many things like this in English as well, where it's the exact same word but with a slight change in it, and it's only until someone from the outside comes in and says, that your wife literally means like the handcuff or handcuff, and you go, oh, I actually like never knew that. Same with like some of the funny jokes like in Spanish when I was trying to say like pájaro, which means bird, and then I was saying pajero instead, which is masturbator. In my mind, that's like so close. That's pajero, pájaro. Like it sounds exactly the same.
Yeah.
But in Spanish, it's just so completely different.
Yeah.
People would be like,
what are you talking about?
They don't understand why it's happening.
They'd be like, why is this person getting this word so wrong? Like, two different things.
Yeah.
The freaking bird and masturbating.
And here's another one. So, do you ever laugh when you see a Mitsubishi Pajero?
No.
Exactly. No. Like, that's probably the first time you've ever thought about that as well. Like,
yes.
It's a Mitsubishi masturbator.
Yeah.
So, it's like these things they go over. So, anyway, one of the things I'm wondering, though, is... the really fun thing about language is that it helps me to connect with other people, and this is why I really enjoy doing this. So I spoke with Pete from Aussie English the other day, and we were like just blabbing about language stuff, man. It was so fun. Do you see any downsides to learning another language or being in this between worlds sort of thing?
It's interesting because my first thing goes no.
Okay.
I do not think of a downside. My only thought if it could be a downside is if you got to the point that you were learning so many languages that you were missing some crucial things of the original languages that you already knew. Maybe.
And I've had slight bits of that. I definitely noticed when I was traveling that my English was degrading. I would struggle to think of a word which nowadays would just come to me instantly. Yeah. So there was a bit of that. But one of the main ones I've actually think was I feel less Aussie than I used to. Okay. I would have used to say like, I'm like full blown Aussie. Like that would just be how I would see myself in my head, I guess. Whereas nowadays, not so much, man. Like I definitely see myself as having still Aussie, but a lesser connection to Australia. Like I probably am less patriotic, for example, now than I was 5 years ago.
Yeah, I think the only other downside that can come to mind is that. With learning a new language, you then might subjugate the actual idea of culture and then forget that you are not from that culture. So, like an example for me would be, like, you're learning Spanish. But Spanish, people don't know. Like, okay, most of South America speak Spanish. Most of it. However, the Spanish is very different across going to play. You would know that, obviously. You went from all different countries. So, Spanish is a little bit different in each one, and the culture is very different in each part. I think learning a language to a particular point, I think might give you an idea that, now I know the language, so I know how to speak, and so in turn I know the culture. And then you'd be dead wrong.
Yeah.
Like, you can learn Russian all you want, but you won't know shit of the culture until you actually go to Russia and go, oh shit, by the way, I forgot that I had to scull some vodka. Right? Just because I know...
I knew you were going to go there.
Like, just because you know Russian, it's like, what the hell is this? Like, what do I do, right?
Yeah.
So I think this can be a little bit of the downside
like
I could
see
is...
confidence.
The false confidence that you build because you haven't been to the place before.
Yeah.
But it can be a positive. You can use it as a positive if you use the language and then build it on top of culture, then you get a home run. It's a whole... I think it was... I can't remember who I was talking to about this, but maybe it was Hustle and Flow. But it was that when you actually layer language plus culture, then you've got actual meaningful conversations. Until you have that, you can't drill down to the actual meaningful bits. So, as much as you want to talk to... I think, for Australians, right? If you know the language of English. That's a level, like that's a good level. Obviously, you can communicate. But we all know from people who are from other countries, right? When you talk to another person like that, they might not get a couple of things, as you'd expect. But once you're at the level of culture, maybe someone who've been here for a long time, or they understand Aussie culture, then you get to a certain level and you can go deeper. You can go deeper into the meaning of the conversation. It's the same thing if you look at it the other way. Just because you know German, Russian, South African, doesn't mean shit of like the actual culture level. So just because I know how to say, what's that word? Hu Han did this or something like that, right? Or how are you? You don't know shit when you actually use it. Do you use that? Do people use that? When should you use good evening? Do people use all this sort of stuff where it's like, no, until you know that level of societal norms, culture, then you've got meaningful conversations, which I think that can be the hard bit about the whole learning a language and speaking with other people. Do you think you've gotten that yet? To the bit of like, so obviously no Spanish.
Yeah.
But then the level of culture, I think you'd be very close.
I'm glad you asked me this because when I was in that trapped underneath the rain or in between me getting soaked in the rain when I was being a savage, there was a girl there in the same area. She got trapped under there. Of course, she's Colombian.
Of course, all Colombian.
Yeah.
Anybody you meet in Brisbane who speaks Spanish is Colombian.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, I agree with
Verified.
this. Mere mortal verified. And I started talking with her and we were just talking about some things, and then I was asking like, "Oh, are you going to the Colombian festival thing that's in a month's time? Do you, etc., etc." And we're talking about Colombia, and it basically came out that she really didn't like Colombian culture a lot. Like she didn't like going to the festival thing. She didn't like the machismo sort of stuff from the guys. I understand that, but then there was just all these things about her and her like lack of Colombianness. It really put me off. And I was like, man, I don't really want to talk to you anymore. Like, yes, we can speak in Spanish to each other. Yeah. And so, I would say in certain cases like that, I am starting to feel like, you can
tell the layer of culture.
Yeah. What I like Spanish, but I like the culture. There's a reason for that because it allows me to connect with that culture, which is something like completely different than
and I think
I
think that's the critical thing. Once you get the cultural level of the layer of that aspect, then it's like, okay, then you've reached it. Then you can understand books, then you can understand music, culture, art, whatever it may be, and then you could be really intertwined and integrated with it.
Yeah.
Until then,
that's the really fun stuff, to be honest. Like if you're learning a language and you're not tying it into that cultural aspect, that's a slog, man. That's how I first tried learning Spanish without any connection to the culture. It was me just trying to learn words, verbatim. It'd be essentially the same as you going back to high school now and taking English and learning verbs and nouns and adjectives.
No one wants to do that. No one wants to do that. No fun.
Split infinitives. This is something I learned recently. If you wanted to say to quietly whisper, for example, that's a split infinitive where you're adding an adjective between the two, the whisper, and it's to quietly whisper. And there was this big debate back in the day of whether this is correct English and not and all this shit. Yeah. And I found that, just fascinating. But if I'd learnt that any other time, and it would just be no, what is this shit? I don't care about this random grammar crap. This is fucking bullshit. Which is sort of the same with English now. I don't care to go into English grammar too much. The reason I liked that was because it was in the book I was reading. So I was like, oh, you know what? That's kind of cool. Something to connect it to. You got anything else? Or all right, here's my mere mortal moment. Okay. And I'm stealing this from one of Peking Duck's videos. Yeah. And it was on a guy's in a little restaurant. Waitress comes up and she asks him how are you going? What would you like? And his pickup line to her was, on a scale to 1 to America, how free are you this evening?
Damn. Very good.
I like
Very
it.
Good.
I like it. That's a good pickup line.
Very good pickup line.
So that's it. You do the outro. It's your turn,
folks. That's been pretty much it for the musings today. There's lots of topics that we covered across there. Freedom of speech, language, learning, yourself, introspection.
Yeah, introspection. Damn.
Hate. We went all the way down to truth. Man,
just keep watching.
Keep watching. Say,
we got everything here.
Yeah. If you want to go back to a couple of the older episodes, we talked about truth. We talked about freedom.
Yep.
You can go all the way back to some of the OG posts around that. Make sure you keep checking this out. I know that I haven't probably said this so much, but there's musing, there's meandering, there's conversations, there's book reviews in both languages. We're talking about languages in both languages.
A little fun fact here: if you're watching on the YouTube and you want to see any of the older episodes, it's only up until 177, so you have to go into the playlist and they're
Yes.
in the unlisted thing, and then you can find all of them in there. We
Correct.
had to do that. The YouTube channel is too big, and we had to split it up.
That's right. We're going to go back to the OG videos. We're going to go check out what the first one looked like.
If you want to see me with hair, if you
Yeah.
want to see Juan, I don't know, was there anything different about you back then?
Nah,
Anything?
drink cans of Coke. Do you remember that?
Yeah,
Cans
that's
of
right.
Coke.
Yeah.
Sponsored by Coke.
Totally.
One day we're going to be sponsored by Coke.
I
Me and Mortal, we're gonna
absolutely forgot about that. That's hilarious.
Sponsored by cans of Coke. And with that, folks, we're going to leave it at that. Make sure you review. Make sure you leave comments. Make sure you like. Make sure you share with the folks. Me and Mortal Lights out there. One out.
Current out. Ching chong chang.
Bye.